Hello, Heartbeat. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Cool. Should I go ahead with the presentation then, I guess, right? So let me just get it started, share my screen. Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Adam, and I'm a data scientist, right? And as Heartbeat said, I'm doing that for over 10 years now. Mostly because I love the fact that data can help my clients to be more profitable and more valuable, or their companies be more profitable and more valuable. And that's why I find it heartbreaking whenever I read statistics provided by Gartner and others that 80% of data projects is failing, they don't make it into production, so there's no significant value, right, delivered. And that's why I decided that today I want to talk about what can we do with that, right? How can we beat the odds? And maybe in time, if we will be really successful as a community of data scientists, how can we even reverse the odds? But let me start with a story from the beginning of my career, when I was learning what data science truly is, and how I was learning a story that taught me, how to approach data science projects. It started in a bank in, I think, 2009, when I was still finishing my master's in mathematics, and I started working as a data scientist in a bank. And I was ready for all the regression and classification problems you can imagine. And so I was quite curious what the first project will be about, right? And then the first project that ended on my table was nothing like that. Actually, the first project was to increase profitability of personal bankers' portfolios. And when I heard that, I thought that maybe they are talking to a wrong person. Maybe I'm in the wrong room. What's that to do with data science? And I felt a bit odd. I felt kind of like the guy in this picture, right? I was ready to swim with my flippers, and they asked me to run through the city. And I realized that retrospectively, that it wasn't just an odd moment. I was actually at a crossroad. And as it is very often with the crossroads, there's many things, many ways that I could have taken, right? I could have gone left to the passive-aggressive alley and say, you know what, that's not data science. I can't do that. You're wrong. You don't know what I can do, but you're the boss, so let's do it. I could have gone through the shortest path to data science haven, when I would say, okay, so how about, I don't know, churn model? That should help with the profitability, right? But luckily, I didn't do any of that. The reason why I didn't choose these two paths was the person who gave me the project. And that was the head of retail distribution network. And he saw that I was a bit hesitant, right, when he gave me the project. And he told me one thing. He said, Adam, don't worry, you're a smart guy. You will figure it out. And retrospectively, I consider this the best professional advice I've been given, right? Because just by playing on my ego, he made sure that I won't be passive-aggressive. I won't jump to quick and easy solutions. But I will do my best to make his problem go away, right? And so I think I went the right path, because I also realized that, you know what, maybe that's what data science is about. Maybe this is data science. And the data science is about solving business problems with data and analytics. But then, as you can imagine, I was left with another problem, right? How can I do that? And remember that I was still at school. I was finishing my studies, and it was my first job, right? So I didn't have any business experience. So what I had to do was to dig really deep to make sure that I find a skill that I can use, right? A problem-solving skill, let's say. And so what I did was I realized that one skill that I found completely useless during my studies is actually quite helpful. So as I said, like I had to solve the problem, right? And I was digging deep into what kind of skills I actually have from my studies, because I didn't have anything from the business experience. So what I realized is that because I went to a very traditional mathematics university, and what we did most of the time was to learn the mathematical theorems and studied their proofs done by famous mathematicians, not me. And what I realized is actually that might be the skill that I need, right? Because very often how it went, especially for me, was that I had to first understand what the statement, what the theorem was about, what the problem was about, and then learn, break it down into components that was easier to solve, and then sequence it in a chain of implication that I go from the assumptions to the statement, right? QED. So I realized that maybe that's an approach that I can try, right, to solve the problem of the increasing of profitability of personal bankers' portfolios. I did that, and to my surprise, it worked, right? And even 12 years after, this framework is still with me. So what I realized is that might be the right framework to solve business problems using data science, right? And it has stayed with me ever since. So let me now use an example from from one of my current engagements with one of my clients, which is operating in the restaurant business. And I would like to use that example to show you, to demonstrate how the framework can be used in real world. So the data science framework that I'm using, and be careful that it's not just for restaurants, is quite simple. It has 3 simple steps, right? The first one is, what business problems do we want to solve, right? What is the problem in front of us? Then, what do we need to solve it, right? What do we need to do to solve that? And the third step is, how are we going to get it done? What's the sequence, right? How do we action it? Now, whenever we are starting on a problem, right, in a new industry, and restaurant industry was new to me, I tried to put myself in the shoes of the customer, right? And we've all been to a restaurant, so we know how it feels, that we feel welcome, we feel comfortable, we're having a great time, it's great food with friends and family, and we are enjoying it, right? It's called hospitality for a reason. But as a data scientist, we also need to worry about and try to understand what's happening in the backstage. And in the backstage, if we would stand up and walk into the kitchen or to the manager's office, we would see a completely different picture. What we might see is something like that, right? That's a picture from a restaurant kitchen. And what you see is, it seems chaotic, right, and frenetic. But in fact, what we are looking at is very tightly run operations, because restaurant is a business and they need to generate profit. And that's exactly the problem that I will be using to demonstrate the framework. So let's say that we are asked to help the restaurant managers to increase the profit of the chain of restaurants. Let's say not one, but let's say a chain of 100 restaurants, right? How do we do that? The first step is to understand the business problem. But before I even start do that, I try to put myself in the right frame of mind. And the frame of mind should, so that I know why is it that I'm doing that, why I'm there. And the answer to this why question, for me at least, is I'm there to solve their business problems. I'm there to help them solving their business problems, right? Which has two dimensions. I'm there to talk business. It's business first. For me, it's about making their business problem go away. And the second component of that is that I'm there to help, which is quite useful when you have that frame of mind, when you start understanding the problem. And now, when I'm ready to start engaging with the restaurant managers to understand the problem, what is it that we need in order to understand a new problem? Curiosity, right? And exactly like the little girl in the picture, we need to ask a lot of questions. We need to ask them, what is influencing profitability in the restaurant business? They might say planning. We go, why? Right? Now, because I can then plan inventory, I can plan labor, I can plan the intraday workload. And we might say, so how do you do it right now? Or what is the hardest about getting the forecast right? And what are the consequences if you are over or under? And as we are learning from their answers, we need to constantly validate our understanding, right? So we should ask questions like, so if I understand you correctly, what you want me to do is to build you a predictive model that will give you daily sales forecast for the next 7 days. And they might say, no, that's not what I'm after. I don't care about daily sales. I care about 30 minutes intervals. Or they might say that if we are significantly off, then it's a big problem, right? So you go, what do you mean by significantly off? And you're learning that. So be like a three-year-old and ask a lot of questions. Get after the understanding of the business problem. What is also important during doing that, right, while you are in the first discussions, is to realize that you're also creating relationships. You're building trust with these people. And I've chosen this image deliberately because it has bridges, and that's exactly what we need to do. So we shouldn't stay isolated on our data science island. We need to build bridges to other people, to the business people, to the experts, to the customers, so that we can communicate with them easily and solve the problem together. So to wrap it up, what I'm doing to understand the business problem that I'm facing, what's in front of me, is I make sure that I have the right frame of mind, which to me is I'm there to help, to solve the business problems. The second one is I'm asking a lot of questions to understand and probe the business problem so that I have a thorough and proper understanding. I need to validate the understanding. What is it that I'm hearing from the people I talk to? And we are also building bridges, right? So we are starting to build a trust-based relationship with these people. But most importantly, we are trying to figure out what the business problem is, right? We have to focus on the business, not on data, not on analytics, but on the business. That's the first step. And then we can move to the second one. So once we understand what is the business problem that we are facing and that we are solving, is what do we need in order to be able to do that? And that's our second step. Number one in this second step is to make sure that your project's objectives are tightly linked to the business strategy, to the business KPIs, to the business objectives, right? Because then everything will be easier. You will easily get a strong sponsor. You will get undivided attention of people that you need undivided attention from. You will get what you need in terms of resources, budget, time, or cooperation. If you don't align your project objective and you can't compel others that they are in fact aligned with the business KPIs, everything will be an uphill battle. Everything. Once we do that, we can move to the data, right? So what is it that we need to solve the problem when it comes to data? And just like this deer is nicely reflected in the lake, head to tail, all important features of the deer, we need to make sure that all important factors that are influencing our demand forecast in the future demand in a restaurant example, we need to make sure that all these factors are captured in our data lake. So historical sales data, bookings, weather, holidays, or local events, sports and culture. We need to make sure that they are in our database, they are in the data model, and they are available to us. And we of course need to worry about questions like what's the quality? Can I trust these data? Where, how does it originate? Where it can be stored? What's the format? And all of that. Because we need to make sure that our data is solid, because our models cannot be only as good as the data. And then, of course, we will need to think about what do we need from the analytics, right? And we always should start with the high-level flow. What's the design of the algorithm or the engine that we are building, right? How do we process the individual inputs? But we also need to or should worry about the individual details, right? So how are we going to incorporate the individual factors influencing future demand into our model? How are we going to model the impact of events? How are we going to model impact of weather? And then we also need to think about the infrastructure, right? Because the purpose of infrastructure is to help us develop and deliver and operate the solution for the restaurant managers. So we need to think about the process end to end. How are we going to do that? how are we going to collect the data? How are we going to build a model? Where are we going to build the model? How are we going to deploy it into production? And how are we going to monitor that everything is running, as we expected it to run? Because imagine it's not 100 restaurants, it's 100,000 restaurants, right? We need to have an automated solution for that. So we need to think end to end holistically. And then of course we need, we all know that we need people like data scientists and data engineers and probably some other people from the organization to help us pull this off. But we should never forget about any other people that can come across the data along the value stream, right? So in our case, we need to think about the waitresses and waiters and chefs and cooks and restaurant managers, right? Because we need to design our solution so that it fits their behavioral patterns. We need to design it so that they are happy with the solution, right? So that they use it. It needs to be human-centric, what we give them. Because in fact, we are even after this beautiful smile, right? Because these people are our customers. We want to make their problems go away and make them happy. So what to do, what to do when you are planning what you need to solve your problem? It's important to think holistically. So it's not only about data and analytics. We need to start from the strategy alignment. We need to consider the data. Of course, we need to plan the analytics. We need to think about and plan the infrastructure. And we should never, ever forget about the people, because we are building a solution that, in any case, there will be people influenced or influencing the solution that we are building. So at that point, we covered the first two steps. So we know and we understand the business problem, and we know what do we need in place in order to be able to solve that. So now it's show time. How are we going to get it done? What's the sequence? What's the road to action? First thing to notice and to realize, right, is that data science projects are notoriously difficult to manage. The reason for that is that they are nonlinear, they are stochastic, they are complex. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of hypothesis testing, a lot of R&D, and it's called data science, right? So the scientific component of data science makes it a bit tricky. Just like the road in the picture, it's zigzagging, through the mountain. So it's not straight path to follow these 10 steps, and you will have a forecasting algorithm that will be less than 5% accurate. It doesn't work simply as that. But that's just the nature of data science. So we don't have to worry about that. We just need to take it into account, because that's one of the constants that we can rely on. So how do we solve it? How do we build the project plan with that in mind? What I like to do is think of the flat pack furniture that you can get in IKEA, right? For instance. So what they do, or what you do when you buy the IKEA furniture, is that you start building individual components, right? You build drawer after drawer, and then you put everything together. And while you are doing that, you're following a manual, right? So that it's systematic. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do when I'm working on my data science projects, because there's so many complexities, so many problems to worry about. And if you can isolate these problems into components and deal with them separately and then put them together, everything becomes much easier. So for instance, in our example, one component might be the data infrastructure to deliver the solution to the restaurant manager, and the other component might be the analytical model itself, right? And within each component, it's generally a good idea to use a layered approach, right? Like with the IKEA furniture, follow the manual step by step. So start with a proof of concept or proof of value to test that your hypothesis for the component holds water, and then build an MVP end to end, so that you have something that might not be perfect, but it's working, right? And then you iterate, you improve in it version 1, version 2, version 3, until you run out of time or budget, or you don't see any more improvements in the solution. But if you break it into components and use the layered approach, it becomes easier to be managed. Now, a lot of organizations are using this agile approach, right? So quarterly projects, two week sprints. is becoming more or less the heartbeat of most of the organization. So the pulse with which the teams are operating. And now the question is if data science can do that, right, with all the complexities and the scientific R&D component of it. And I think it can. But what we need is to get a bit more flexibility when it comes to what is it that we are doing within the sprints. So it's not like follow these 5 steps, build these, do these 10 tasks, and the sprint is done, right? The solution is built. What we need to have is some sort of experience and intuition when it comes to what is it that we are going to try, what is it that we are not going to try, when do we keep pushing because we haven't cracked it yet, but we believe that it's the right way forward, and when do we just say, you know what, we thought it will work, but it doesn't, so let's drop it. And this only comes with experience. So you either have experienced people in the team that can bring this intuition and ideas, what to try and what not to try, or you discuss it with them, or you develop that experience yourself. And the only way how to do that is to work on many projects. So don't worry, just do the first step, get started, and in time, let's hope that we all will become better and we will be making less mistakes. But that's something that is quite important when working within the sprints and within the projects. So to wrap up the third step, we need to be aware of the nonlinear and difficult way of managing data science projects. What helps is to break it into components and then use a layered approach, iterative approach that you apply within these components, and then you put everything together. And it's very helpful to develop an experience and intuition behind what to try and what not to try, and when to stop and when to keep pushing, because that is how we can make it happen. So that's the framework. Number 1 is what business problems do we want to solve? Number 2 is what do we need to do that? And the third step is how are we going to get it done? I hope that even in this short time, I was able to explain a bit how that can be used in a real world problem, and how I'm using it in the problems that I'm working on, in the project that I'm assigned to, and I hope that you find it useful. What I think are some of the key takeaways, what I would like you to walk away with. It is unproportionately more important to understand the problem than working on the solution, because a perfect solution to the wrong problem doesn't count, right? We need to solve the problem that is in front of us. And if you don't take my words for it, read the quote by Albert Einstein. Like in the game of hopscotch that we might know from our childhood, or we can't jump over the numbers. We have to go one by one. And in our case, it means don't jump to data and analytics and infrastructure and technology too quickly. We have to start with number 1. And because data science is business first, number 1 is business. So we need to start with that in mind, and then we can move to the other components. What I told you about is the framework that I'm using, and I'm using it because it provides me with stability and confidence and some sort of a methodology that I can follow, and I can increase the likelihood that my projects will be in this 20% that make impact, right? So that's the way how I'm beating the odds. Feel free to use it. Don't rush to take the training wheels off too quickly. I think it's very helpful to have a framework that helps you ground the problem solving or the project, data science project solving that we are all working on. And now, very often the data scientists, we are worrying about the outputs, right? So what's the model? What's the model's accuracy? What kind of data we put in place? What's the infrastructure? These are outputs, right? What we need to also worry about are the outcomes. So I'm not saying that we should forget about the outputs. That's of course our craft. We need to do that. But what is much more important is the value we create. What are the benefits of what's the impact we are making? So what I'm hoping to to explain is that we need to focus on the outcomes. What's the business impact we delivered with our projects, rather than what's the model's accuracy and which algorithm we actually used in our solution. And then my last thing is that very often, it's not as easy as it sounds, right? It sounds like 3-step framework. What's so difficult about it? But in fact, it's quite tricky to do in the real life. And the thing is that very often you will feel that the project, the problem that you're facing has really nothing to do with data science, or you would be lost, or you wouldn't know what to try or how to break it down and how to tame the beast, right? If it's a really big and difficult project. So I want to tell you the advice that I've been given, right, in the beginning of my career that I started this talk with, and that's this thing. Right? So whenever you feel lost, whenever you feel that it's too difficult, just remember a simple thing. You are smart and you will figure it out. Right? And I hope this will help you as it did help me in my career. And that's the way how I'm beating the odds. And that's the way how I hope that in time we will be able to reverse the odds and make data science projects much more successful and deliver much bigger impact. So that's it. Thanks a lot. I'm Adam. I'm solving business problems using data.
Adam, that was a phenomenal presentation. I personally took a lot away from that. I'm very similar to you, coming from a background as a math student. Totally resonated with everything you're saying as I start to progress along in my career and dealing more and more with business people. But for me, like I feel like the hardest thing is actually understanding what the right question to ask is to diagnose the business problem. Can you share some tips on how we can figure out what the right questions to ask are?
Yeah, so when you are working on a project, then it's usually given, right? But the tricky thing is when you are working on what's the data strategy, what do we want to solve? What's the higher level of that component? That's the most difficult thing, right? And any consultant that is working on the data strategy will tell you that the single most difficult thing is to get the business strategy from the management. But if you simplify it a bit, then they usually have a good understanding. The best question, I think, is really ask them, or not a question, but it's the approach is to focus them to tell you about the business, right? What's keeping them up at night? Because very often if you say, hey, I'm Adam, I'm a data scientist, they will start talking about, this is what I would like you to build when it comes to data and analytics, or they would tell, I don't know what data can do for me, so you tell me, right? And what you need to do is to steer it back, because they are running a business, right? They know what's the problem. So keep it on the business.
Yeah, that's exactly the stage I am in my career. After having built hundreds and hundreds of models, now it's like, okay, go build a data strategy. And I have no clue what I am doing with respect to this. So that advice is very, very valuable. Tying it back to models now. So how can we tie model performance to a business outcome? You mentioned that it's not necessarily the same, right? Like the output and the outcomes aren't necessarily the same, but how do we link the performance of a model or the accuracy of a model to some business outcome?
Yeah. So I think that as I explained, I hope in the presentation, it's a holistic solution. So it's not just a model existing in the vacuum, right? You have to deliver the whole ecosystem to solve the problem, and then the KPIs of the project should be business KPIs, right? So the business outcome, and that's what you should be measuring. Probably with an A/B test, so that you can evaluate it in the reality and you see what was the impact. I don't think it's that just translating the model accuracy or model performance to the business numbers is the right approach, because there's many other things that are happening, right? There will be people who will be influencing the data. There will be people who will be working with the recommendations that you are giving them, or there might be many other factors influencing the final output. But what you should worry is the output. And then, of course, for the data scientist, we need to worry about the model performance, right? Because there is an assumption that the better the model is, the better the business KPIs will be. So I think, I don't think there is a generic answer how to translate it, accuracy into or performance into business impact. But we should always be measuring the business impact and less worry about the models.
So a couple questions here from the audience. The first one is there a risk management methodology to be used in data science projects?
Well, I'm not aware of that. If there is anything like that, I think the data science started as really like a punk done by a couple of cowboys, right? So it was really Wild West for a long time, and now when you see with all the data ops and ML ops initiatives, we are trying to make sure that we can put things in the production. So I think the risks should be taken when it comes to making sure that you use iterative approach, so that at any point in time you have a solution, because it's not academic exercise that you have like 20 years to figure it out. You need to focus on delivering something and then improving it. And then it also helps to think about it holistically, because most of the time I've seen that the projects are failing because they miss one of the components. We forgot about people, or we forgot about the business, or we forgot about the infrastructure, or we forgot about certain data points that we should have included.
So how do we handle or identify data bias?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? and honestly, before I started my data diligence company, I was working for an HR tech business, and we were working in the space of culture change of large multinational organizations, right? And when you think about biases and discrimination in the models, and it is really difficult. So I think the right approach is to follow the principles of ethical AI, that you make sure that you don't your model is not reiterating the biases that are in the data, or you make sure that you are training on as generic sample as possible, so that it's as close as possible to the fact that to the sample that you will be applying your models to, right? In our case, it was that we had to train the models that worked for everyone, not only in English. It was a lot of NLP, but you can't train it on English, because you can't just use native speakers, right? If it will be a second language, then of course the models will be discriminating, and there's many other things. So I think it needs to be done in a combination with human experts and prior and ex post testing of the biases in the data.
So how is your company bridging the gap between data and diligence?
Yeah, so in fact, the company is focusing on the fact that throughout my career, I realized that very often the management, they have a clear vision. They know what they want to do, right? Also going back to your previous question, is that they know what they want to do with the business. They have a business strategy. And then on the other hand, on the other side, you have plenty of data scientists and data engineers and data products and services and providers, right? And they are telling them, our solution is the best one. Tell us what you want and we will build it for you. But the main problem is that the executives very often, they don't know what is it that they want, right? So it's like, if you are building a house, you don't go to do-it-yourself store and try to figure out, what is it that I need, right? And just ask people randomly or let them walk on the property and start building a house for you, right? You need to have a strategy, and you need to have this link. So you need an architect, and in the housing example. And so what we are trying to do for our customers is to bridge the gap between the business strategy, what either the management is doing or the management consultants are providing them with, and how to break it into data strategy. What are the individual projects? What is the infrastructure that they need? What are the models that they should be building? What are the use cases that they should worry about? So that's what we do. Because we work for private equity, our offering is that it usually starts in the data due diligence phase. That's why we called ourselves data diligence, is that we need to understand, or the private equity investors, they need to understand what's the potential of the company that they are targeting, they would like to buy, right? And when they buy it, then we help them with the data strategy, and then it goes into execution.
So how do you overcome the challenge of adoption, especially when you are in the presence of a solution that's already in place, right? Because once people have an idea of how something works or how something should work, they always want the next thing to be just like the first.
You mean with the existing data solution that you are trying to change it, or you are changing the behaviors of people by it?
Let's talk a little bit about both because I think both is extremely relevant.
Yeah. So I think, I started as a generic mathematician, and to me, people, that was probably the most distant thing that was related to data science. But through time, I realized that's the most important component, right? And so I think that what we need to do, and there's these design thinking approaches, and a lot of data science teams are hiring behavioral scientists or sociologists or psychologists, is that we need to understand the behavior of people, right? It's about the habits, it's about their mindsets, it's about their behaviors, and we need to fit our solution into that. And how do we change it? What are the nudges? What are the hooks, or whatever that might be? So I think we as data scientists needs to learn about the fact that it's not just, here's a data model or data powered solution, and here is how you use it, and that's the manual, right? Because very often, for example, in my restaurant example, the restaurant managers are doing that for 20 years, right? They are experienced professionals and they are dealing with this problem. And then we come, think about it for 5 minutes and offer them a solution, right? And if, we just need to think about what are their behavioral patterns so that they will be happy with that. So I think it's very often that we need to fit it around it needs to be human centric. So it needs to be built so that they can work with that, not that we force them to use it. Of course, there might be some pushes, right? That sometimes the current behaviors are not the desired one, right? Very often when the company, is facing a significant challenge on the market and they need to shift the way how they operate. And then you actually need to introduce new tools. But then it's about the change mindset, right? So it's again, but it needs to be supported by changing the culture, right? That goes with that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most challenging aspects, man. Like, this is the type of stuff that nobody teaches you about in school. You don't find out until you're out in the real world. So just to kind of, I know you talked about it during your presentation. I know we kind of talked about in this Q&A session, but just to really drive the point home for folks watching, because I think this is super, super important. Let's run with this example of the restaurant owner, or maybe a CEO of a chain of restaurants, right? If you were to come talk to this individual to really understand what their business problems were, how would you, what are some questions that you would ask them to understand, let's say, how they can implement using data or implement a data strategy to help their decision making?
Yeah, so to me, that's actually usually how the pitches go, right? And to me, the best pitch is that the customer is talking for most of the time. So what I try to make or to make happen is that I ask them questions so that they start talking about their business, right? And very often the questions should be, the one that I'm using is what is your business strategy, right? What's keeping you up at night? What are the most important factors that are influencing the profitability or the value of your business? Do you worry about risks? Is discovering new revenue streams your problem, or are you after optimization of or making the operations more efficient, or do you want to increase revenue or decrease cost, or you don't understand your customers? And very often they have a good sense of this. I think the most important thing during this conversation, and that's why I was talking about having the right frame of mind when you're walking into them, is to remind yourself that you are there to solve their business problems, right? Because very often the executives will say, once you mention the word data, they will say, we are just upgrading our ERP, or we are implementing a BI platform, or we don't know what we don't know, so you tell us. or maybe we think that we need a segmentation, or how about you build us a churn model, right? And this is all wrong. So because we are starting from the wrong angle, and maybe they will be lucky and they are right, but very often it's not the case, right? So try to steer the conversation back to the business problem, right? So I try to play really a simple person, and I'm there to help. So I'm asking questions about, they are experts, and very often if you play on that note, they like, CEOs are driven individuals. They like to listen to themselves. They like to brag about their business. And once they start talking about it, they very often lead you the right way. So they know, right? But you should steer the conversation to the data, to the business, and not let the conversation jump too quickly to data or analytics, because it can happen easily. Because if a very senior person start asking you the questions, you need to be quite confident and comfortable to shoot it back and say, thanks a lot, but let me first understand the business problem, right? So you tell me.
I absolutely love that, because in your line of questions that you asked, you didn't bring up anything about, what data are you using to make your decisions? What reports are you looking at? You didn't ask any of those type of questions. You started from inside their kind of perspective, what do you care about your business? Where do you see your business heading? What keeps you up at night? Things like that. And I think that is really, really important. And I've made the mistake of asking questions from a data-centric point of view, which ends up just getting me to a point where I'm delivering a solution that nobody really wants. But yeah, so I really, really appreciate that. I don't see any more questions from the audience. Adam, thank you so much for that presentation. I, for one, really, really enjoyed that. Hope we get a chance to connect offline at some point. I'd love to chat with you. Thank you very much, man. Really appreciate that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the invitation. Enjoy the rest of the conference.